Welcome to the Scars of Heart channel and invite you to watch our new video. Margarita Stepanovna, why are you so busy again? A dacha is for relaxing. Oh, what kind of relaxation is that? Hi, Ninotchka. The elderly woman straightened her back and looked at her neighbor. Hey, I see you're not lying on a sun lounger either. I'm enjoying myself. So am I. My son and daughter-in-law have gone to the seaside, and who's going to pick the tomatoes? Trim the strawberry runners. Even if we were here, I'd have to do everything myself. And then there's this weather. Margarita Stepanovna looked up. I hope it rains a little, otherwise it's completely suffocating. Oh, Nina, the plump middle-aged woman looked longingly at the cloudless summer sky. The forecast says nothing is expected for the next week. That's just it. And that means it'll need watering this evening. Oh, I told Vanechka he shouldn't have bought such a big plot. 400 square meters would have been enough. But he doesn't. He needs to be like everyone else. And he's already chilling in the next world, while I'm still crouched here. Boria rarely comes by. They have things to do, work, and it's not you say. The neighbor waved her hand in agreement. What kind of help can children provide? You only have to rely on yourself. If you want, I'll ask Tanya to water your beds. And what, Tanyusha? Is it here? Here, of course. Where else? He sits in the attic under the air conditioner and works. Here, he says. It's quiet. And no one bothers him. What times we have these days, the elderly neighbor admired. Work from wherever you want, and you don't have to run for the tram every morning at 7 Tokro. That's true. Nina nodded in agreement. Then I'll tell Tanyuka to help. No, dear. Don't. I can manage on my own for now. Thank you for your concern. As you wish, she shrugged. Okay, I'll go into the house. It's too hot. You should also rest until 5 o'clock. And that's it. That's right. Work is not a wolf. Margarita Stepanovna nodded in agreement. She gathered up her tools, picked up the stool she sat on while weeding the beds, and headed for the shed. But halfway there, she suddenly stopped abruptly. Nina, what? The neighbor turned around, already climbing up her own porch. Is Tanya going to town? I don't know for sure. I think she was planning on tomorrow. What, do you need to bring something? No. On the contrary, I need to take it. I wanted to give you some lightly pickled cucumbers for Boris's arrival. Of course, I'll tell her to stop by before she leaves. Thank you very much, my dear. God bless you and your daughter. Nina nodded in gratitude and went into the house. Margarita had been obsessed with the idea of buying a dacha since she had just turned 40. She herself, a city girl, had heard plenty of stories at work about fresh greens, cucumbers, and tomatoes from her older colleagues, who were keen on gardening, and returning home from work, she said to her husband, Vanya, "We need to buy a plot of land outside the city." Why? He was surprised. Up until that moment, the conversation about a dacha had never come up in the family. You always complain that in a 3-room apartment everything is on you, and here we also have a dacha. You don't understand. We will be there to relax. Imagine that you and I are sitting not in the apartment in front of the TV on the weekend, but in the fresh air, with the chirping of birds and the sound of the wind, and all around there is silence and the smell of grass. Ivan wanted to object that of all his friends who had a country house, he did not know a single person who would relax there. But from the determination in his wife's eyes, he realized that arguing was useless. She could not be dissuaded, and he nodded obediently. Okay, let's see. Everything was working out as well as possible. Just that year, there were a lot of plots for sale. Margarita and her husband went and looked at which one would suit them best. They really liked one. But at the last moment, the owners decided to take it off the market. Margarita was angry and very upset. Why did they say they were selling it and then back out? They only give people unnecessary hope. Probably, my dream will never come true. However, the next day, what a coincidence, my 20-year-old son came to visit and said, "Mom, my friend's parents are here. They're selling the dacha and are planning to move south, closer to the sea. But Pasha doesn't need it. Maybe you should look with your father? Pashka, he says the location is good, the house is solid, and they'll give you a discount." Why the discount then, if everything's so good? Father narrowed his eyes incredulously. Because they want to leave quickly, and because we know each other, and it's always easier to sell to your own people than to look for strangers. The plot wasn't bad. Of course, it couldn't compare with the first one, but it was well kept and tidy. Plus, the owners promised to leave all the tools and other utensils behind, which meant there wouldn't be any extra money after the purchase. The only thing that confused Rita was the 600 square meters. She'd originally been planning on 400 square meters. Why does she need so much land? And what will she do with that much space? She's not going to plant potatoes, is she? Oh well, Ivan waved his hand. More, not less. If you don't need it, I'll make a parking lot for 2 cars here. The extra 100 square meters will go away. And why 2? Rita was surprised. We only have 1. She was afraid to get behind the wheel and never dreamed of having her own car. And what about Borko? Her husband narrowed his eyes. Our son is already grown up. He recently got his license. He'll buy himself one. He'll come visit. That's what we decided on. Margarita hadn't even imagined how much she'll have more trouble with the new purchase. Her colleagues made it sound easy. Plant, weed, scorch, harvest. But in reality, it all started back in February, when Rita went to the market for seeds, planted them in cups, placed them on the windowsill, and eagerly awaited the seedlings. Her husband watched her vegetable gardening efforts with undisguised curiosity. The question in his eyes wasn't mine. I wonder how long you'll last. But she wasn't afraid of failure. With each passing season, she grew better and better. And while Ivan was busy remodeling the house for his family, Rita was able to preserve several jars of cucumbers and tomatoes for the first time, and even arrange a large flower bed by the windows, so that some flowers unknown to her husband and son were constantly blooming. Wow, Borko marveled when he first visited his parents at their dacha closer to September. "I didn't know you had such talents hidden inside you, Mom, and you should come more often," Rita smiled. "I'm glad you liked it. Next season, my son will be in full swing." He appreciated his parents' dacha and came over with some friends for a barbecue. The group of guys and girls were shy at first, but as the meat sizzled on the skewers and the clear amber drink poured into mugs, everyone began to loosen up. Laughter and loud conversations erupted, and after a hearty dinner, everyone gathered around the fire and began singing along to a guitar. Rita and Ivan sat inside, watching the festivities from the window, trying not to disturb the young people's relaxation. At one point, the man moved closer and put his arm around his wife's shoulders. "I'm glad you talked me into buying a dacha," he said in her ear and kissed her on the cheek. "It's good that you agreed to buy it," she smiled back, not taking her eyes off the mesmerizing flame, which was clearly visible in the darkness. In that very company, as Borka later claimed, was a girl named Olga, whom a couple of years later he introduced to his parents as his fiancée. Polya fell in love with Igor at first sight. Tall, with a mane of thick, wavy hair, in which, by the age of 25, gray strands already glistened, he stood out favorably from her peers. There was a difference of 3-4 years. Looking at him, it was very significant. And when the girl learned that Igor played the guitar, her admiration knew no bounds. And she agreed to go to the dacha at Boris's invitation only because he hinted at Igor's presence in the cheerful company. At first, the girl was a little shy. She hadn't met the parents of the man who had invited her, didn't know how to behave, and tried to stay close to her friends. During the entire time they were at the dacha, she only went into the house a couple of times, and said nothing more than hello and thank you. But she listened, mesmerized, as Igor played the guitar, the reflection of the flames reflected in his eyes, and the way he lost his head as he strummed the strings. Then Boris invited his friends to stay, promising that there would be room for everyone, and many agreed. However, Igor said he had to go to work early in the morning, and getting there from outside the city would be difficult, so it would be better if he went now. Olga decided she shouldn't stay either. 2 other guys were also getting ready to leave. Yesterday, they piled into Igor's car and drove back along the highway at night, into the city. It was an unforgettable journey for the girl. She kept looking at the back of the driver's head or out the side window at the road, but at some point she glanced in the rearview mirror and met Igor's eyes. "Tired?" he asked sympathetically, and in response to her nod, he said to the other passengers, "Guys, do you mind if we take the lady home first? We'll be there soon. Just be patient." "No, no." Olga wanted to scream. "Why don't you drop me off last?" But in reality, she only smiled gratefully at him. After that trip, they crossed paths a few more times in the same groups, greeting each other with glances and nods, smiling, and even occasionally chatting about something insignificant. Olga's heart melted every time she saw Igor, but their relationship never went any further. After each such encounter, the girl began to dream about what a wonderful couple they would make. Then, these dreams faded, only to flare up with renewed vigor with a new encounter. This infatuation ended abruptly. Just before the new year, Olga's best friend Natasha suddenly confessed that pregnant. What? By whom? The girl was surprised, knowing that Natasha wasn't married, nor did she even have a boyfriend in mind. That's when it all came to light. Olga learned that her friend had also been pining for Igor, but she'd proven much bolder. They spent a few nights together, and when he found out she was pregnant, he immediately dumped her, explaining that it was impossible to have a family, as he'd been in love with a married woman for a long time. With this confession, not only did Olga's friendship with Natasha fall apart, but she also lost all love for the handsome guitarist, who, upon closer inspection, turned out not to be such a good guy. Some time passed after the breakup with her friend, and Olga turned her attention to Borya, who, as she later recalled, was always hanging around somewhere, but never pushing himself. At first, they simply became close friends, going to events together and socializing in the same group. It seemed like there was nothing between them, and couldn't be. However, a moment came when the girl suddenly felt like she missed her friend's presence and wanted to see Borya more often. Almost immediately, he seemed to he read her thoughts and appeared out of nowhere. "Oh, hi," the guy smiled widely and sincerely. "I was just passing by and thought of you." "Really?" Olga was delighted. "I was also thinking about meeting up. Long time no see. Fools think alike. Do you remember Igor? He's made it onto the stage and is giving some concert. Would you like to go see him?" she asked, surprised, now, even after a short time had passed. When the veil of infatuation had fallen from her eyes, the girl already understood perfectly well that Igor had no outstanding qualities other than his looks. He played mediocrely, sang even worse, and with that, you could break into the stage. Well, Sobori was confused. I don't know for sure, but it seems there's some kind of city festival planned, and in honor of it, they're gathering local talents. He was one of them, and even invited me to watch. Olga, on the one hand, wasn't really keen on going to Igor's concert, but on the other, she'd always been interested in gatherings. Why not agree? The concert really wasn't great. After the first act, the friends left, never having seen their friend perform. There is one plus in this. Borya laughed when they went outside. He tried to find something good in any situation. And the girl also really liked this trait of Borya. It was easy and fun with him. What is this? She looked at her companion with interest. Now I know who will win in the nomination of the worst concert of the year. I think I know it too. Olga supported his laughter. She felt some kind of kinship with her friend, and from that evening, probably, their romance began, although they confessed their feelings to each other a little later. From that very concert, Olga stopped being angry with herself for her first love, and even remained grateful to Igor in some way. After all, if it were not for him, she probably would not now have such a wonderful husband, with whom they coincided in many ways in mood, and in desires, and even in many interests. Therefore, when Borya brought her for the second time to the dacha to his parents to introduce her as his bride, the girl already felt more confident, although still a little embarrassed. Margarita Stepanovna. Margarita Stepanovna. The neighbor was standing at the fence between the plots when an elderly woman, hearing her name, she left the house. What happened, Nin? Nothing. You yourself wanted to deliver something to the city. Tatiana is getting ready to go. Oh, really? How good that you told me. Otherwise, being such a fool, I would have missed everything. I'll run, now. The woman ducked back into the house and immediately stuck her head out the door again. Ninok, what? Where is she going? There's a break in the commuter trains now. The neighbor laughed. Oh, come on, Margarita Stepanovna. Young people today don't take the commuter trains. Tatiana's boyfriend came for her in a car. He'll take her. In a car, the elderly woman gasped. That's wonderful. Not legs. And if Tanya can't carry all this in her hands, then maybe I can give you more than one jar. Otherwise, why bother going for just one? Oh, come on, Nulana waved her hand. Go ahead and bring it. Don't think it'll be too heavy in the car. About 10 minutes later, Margarita Stepanovna appeared on the neighbor's doorstep. Hi, Tanyusha. Your mom told me you'll be driving. Then you might want to grab these jars and a bag of apples, some early ones, because the kids are coming in 2 days, so we'll have something to snack on. The neighbor's slender, skinny daughter looked 18, well, 20 at the most. Perhaps her short, almost boyish haircut and the t-shirt and shorts, a little stretched out, a little dirty, just like a teenager's, gave her a youthful look. In fact, Tanya was approaching 30. Yes, of course, Aunt Rita. Go ahead, the girl nodded, took the bags from the old woman's hands and was about to carry them to the car waiting at the gate, when she suddenly stopped abruptly. Aunt Rita, if they don't return until the day after tomorrow, how will I give them to them? Or will I have to stop there in 2 days? I wasn't planning on staying in the city for that long. Come on, dear, no need to wait. Just drop it off as soon as you leave. I'll give you the keys. Margarita Stepanovna took a bunch of keys from her pocket and handed them to the girl. Look. This is the top lock, and this is the bottom one. It's all simple there. You're a smart girl. You'll figure it out once you get to the 6th floor. Just open the door. Put everything back where it is in the hallway, even on the threshold, and slam the door. It won't go bad in a couple of days. And if you need to go into town yourself, how will you get there without your keys? I won't need to. I rarely go there. Bring them when you get back, and if you're late, it's no big deal. I can live without going into town. Borya will be here in 2 days. I'm just keeping them as spares. You never know. My son or daughter-in-law might lose them, forget them, and slam the door so they're there. Thank you very much, Tanyusha. Sorry for the trouble. What trouble, Margarita Stepanovna? We'll be passing through your neighborhood anyway. Thank you, dear. Have a safe trip, Tanyusha. Oh, knock on wood, Margarita Stepanovna. You don't say such wishes on the road. Yes, the elderly woman said in surprise. We used to talk like that all our lives. And what do they wish for now? Nothing, Tatiana shrugged. Good luck, or just goodbye? Well then, goodbye and good luck. Margarita walked into her yard and watched through the fence as a man got out of his car and helped the neighbor's daughter load her luggage into the trunk. then waved his hand at no one in particular and everyone following Tanya, and the car, its engine purring, smoothly pulled away. What, Tatiana's fiancé never comes to see you? Margarita Stepanovna looked at her neighbor. And that's okay, Nina hissed angrily. I told her I won't tolerate him in my place. House, I see. But really, what's not to like? How can she like him if someone almost my age, an old womanizer and philanderer, has now decided to take on my Tanya? She, the fool, is really perking up her ears. I've been telling her for so long that they're not a match, that he doesn't love her, but her youth, and that they don't need her for nothing. Besides, he's been married more than once, and now he's getting divorced again. I ask, do you need it? In a couple of years he'll divorce you too. And do you know what she tells me? So be it. But I'll live these 2 years happily. We've already fought so many times, then made up, and then everything starts all over again. He's like a groom of discord. It's okay, Ninok. Don't worry. Give her time. She's a smart girl. She'll figure out what's what herself. I really hope so, Nina sighed. Okay, I'll go clean up while the house is free. That's true. I'll go too. Margarita Stepanovna put her hand to her forehead as if surveying her property. She stood there, thought about something, and then went into the house. Unlike many summer residents, the elderly woman never worried that her son didn't come here often. Of course, she sometimes put on a show in front of the neighbors, sighing about his reluctance. The younger generation was tasked with planting and harvesting. But this was more for show, to stay on track. In reality, Margarita Stepanovna held no grudges or resentments, and while he was alive, she often calmed her husband when he became angry. Vanya, remember when you were Borya's age? You really wanted to garden. Well, I didn't have a garden then to want to, the man countered. Well, Borya doesn't have one either. This is our dacha. Just remember, you ever thought about going out of town and relaxing in peace? Peace? Probably not. You wanted company around the campfire, singing and partying all night. There you see. And why did you decide Borya was different? He's enjoying his youth. Let's not interfere with him. After all, when we bought the dacha based on his opinion, we didn't ask whether he needed it or not, which means we have no moral right to insist on his visits, and yet even shook his head discontentedly. We're parents. We need help. Or would you say that's not true? And you can come here for the campfire. Remember, he invited his friends when the dacha first appeared. At that moment, the dacha was exotic for him, and now it's become ordinary. He has plenty of other hobbies, and you have to admit, we don't need much help. You'd think we were weak. You know, Margarita smiled softly. We're perfectly capable of running the household ourselves. And by the way, raising him too. Our son has grown up to be wonderful, independent, and attentive. Don't anger God. Okay, the man agreed, hugging his wife. I agree. You're a real peacemaker. On one of those rare days when Borya dropped by his parents' dacha, he introduced them to his fiancée, a quiet and pretty blonde named Olga. Why didn't you warn us you weren't coming alone? Margarita Stepanovna read as she bustled about in the kitchen, trying to feed her dear guests. Help yourself, Olenka. These are our zucchini, grown with my own hands. A sweet girl and modest, the woman delivered her verdict after the young people had left. She and Borya look good together. Ivan glanced meaningfully at his wife. Now they'll definitely thank us. For what? For lunch? Rita didn't understand. He laughed. Well, and for lunch too, I guess. For the fact that you and I have a dacha. He'll get married soon, and the kids will go. Where should we take them for the summer? To their grandparents' dacha, of course. Oh wait, you. Rita waved her hand at him with a laugh. They're only getting married in 3 months, And you're already talking about grandchildren. So maybe that's why he's getting married. Because it's already time, her husband chuckled. But he turned out to be wrong. A year passed after their son's wedding. Then 3, 5, 7. Ivan still didn't have any grandchildren. Margarita didn't ask her son and daughter-in-law any questions, afraid to step on a sore spot. And only once, after her beloved husband's funeral, did she casually remark, Vanya so dreamed of babysitting his grandchildren, but he didn't get the chance. Well, God has his own plans for each of us. There was no response to her remark. However, the woman hadn't expected one. For a while after the wedding, Olga was surprised that she and her husband had similar tastes. They liked the same dishes, performers, and art genres. They dreamed of vacationing in the same places. But is that really possible? My friends have it all differently, the girl mused. She wants to go to the sea, and he wants to go to the mountains. She wants to go to an exhibition, and he wants to go to football. But for us, everything is very similar. Over time, Olga got used to this. Coincidences, but she was still amazed one evening when, returning from work, she found a guitar at home. Oh, where did we get an instrument? She looked at her husband in amazement. Boris shrugged. Well, I decided to try to learn to play. But if you tell me I'm crazy, and this is all nonsense and a waste of money, then I'll give up. What are you saying? She protested hotly. On the contrary, I really like it when a man plays the guitar. For almost 2 years, Boris took lessons and even learned to play quite passably. However, he was still shy about singing. And, for that matter, about playing in public, too. Olga remained his only listener. But when they sat down on the sofa in the evening and Borya picked up the guitar, his wife felt like the day could not have ended better. At such moments, she was absolutely happy. Boris didn't even admit to his parents that he'd mastered a musical instrument. Why don't you tell Mom and Dad? Olga asked in surprise. Are you afraid they won't like it? No. He shook his head. I just don't want to make them lie. If they find out, they'll want to listen. And I can't refuse them. And when they listen, they'll say I play wonderfully. It can't be any other way. After all, I'm their son. And that's obviously not true. I understand the level of my playing. Aren't you afraid of my criticism? You yourself supported me when I asked for advice. So be patient, because you're also to blame for this. Boris laughed. I suggest that this remain our family secret. Even after their father's death, Olga couldn't persuade Boris to open up about his passion, even to his mother. There was another secret in their family. The couple had trouble having children. And although Olga and Boris skillfully laughed off their friend's tactless questions, the girl was filled with gratitude to her in-laws, who never brought up the sore subject. 10 years after their wedding, neither Boris nor Olga had even mentioned having children, having tacitly agreed to let things slide. Whatever happens, so be it. That day, after her father-in-law's recent funeral, Olga returned from work and looked in surprise at her husband as he walked into the house. Apartment a little earlier. Are you smoking or something? The woman distinctly smelled the odor. I was more surprised than outraged, Boris. No, of course not. What made you think that? But you smell. The man demonstratively sniffed his clothes. Nothing like that, but it smells. His wife approached him and began to sniff. Borya was right. He didn't smell, but there was a distinct odor in the apartment. Maybe it was the neighbors who brought it? Olga shrugged and went to the window. Let's open it and air it out. She reached for the vent and fell unconscious. That's how the couple learned they were expecting a baby. The first person to be told the good news was, of course, Margarita Stepanovna. Boris's mother had recently buried her beloved husband, and now, having heard that she would soon become a grandmother, she lamented. Well, Vanya didn't live very long. What a shame. and I waited so long. So long. The whole family prepared for the baby's birth, renovating it to have room for a crib, buying diapers and feeding bottles, as well as various rattles, soft toys, and other baby accessories. Olga and her daughter were welcomed home from the hospital with flowers and balloons. That year, Margarita Stepanovna even gave up the entire dacha season to help her daughter-in-law with the baby. Alyonka, her granddaughter, had shown who was boss since infancy. Even lying in her crib, she managed to be mischievous, and when she stood up, she didn't walk, but immediately ran. It was utterly impossible to keep an eye on the little troublemaker. Margarita Stepanovna simply couldn't keep up with the speed of the little one's mischief. Even her father's guitar-assisted lullabies calmed Alyonka only before bed. At any other time, the girl listened with half an ear, eager to run away. Her son and daughter-in-law let the tired Donelse Margarita Stepanovna go to the dacha and promised to bring their granddaughter there. For the first 3 years this was barely possible, with some persuasion, but then it became completely impossible. Alyonka didn't like the fresh air. Her hands and face would swell from insect bites. Nettles stung painfully, and needles from the pine tree on the property would pierce her heels when the girl ran out into the yard. As soon as Alyona got older, she would start having hysterics about not going to the dacha. She wants to, but would rather ride her bike in the yard with the boys, racing each other. Then, Boris, with a stern fatherly determination, enrolled his daughter in a sports club. And lo and behold, it turned out to be both the best and most controversial decision from the parents' point of view. On the one hand, Alyonka began to show remarkable talent, channeling all her energy into achieving results, and the coaches promised her a bright professional future. But on the other hand, the older Alyonka got, the less her parents saw her, let alone her grandmother. "I feel like I only see my granddaughter on TV at competitions," Margarita Stepanovna lamented to her son. "Mom, you won't believe it, but neither do we," Boris agreed. She stops by for half a day, packs her things, and rushes off again. Olga really hopes that after Alyonka finishes school, she will give up professional sports and get a proper profession. However, between you and me, Boris leaned closer to his mother. For some reason, I think this won't happen. Training camps, competitions, then more training camps and more competitions. Alyona got a half hour at best. There were only a few months a year when she could afford to relax, and even that time, the young girl preferred to spend with friends, with her teammates, rather than with her parents. Each visit to the young star's home and to her grandmother's dacha was celebrated more than New Year's and her birthday combined. The coaches were right. By the time she reached adulthood, Alyona had not only won all the major competitions, but also earned enough money to buy her own apartment and a car. Boris's predictions also proved correct. After receiving her diploma, Alyona declared that she would pursue exclusively professional sports. "Daughter, how can this be?" Olga shook her head. "Sport is great when you're young, but you have a long life ahead of you. When it's over, you'll find yourself without any profession that can be useful in everyday life. And I won't have an everyday life. I'll become a coach, or a sports agent, or a commentator. I have many options, so don't worry about me." And as if to prove her point, Elena, out of the blue for everyone in her family, married a Spanish gymnast, changed her athletic citizenship, and left the country. This time, Boris was furious. Now Margarita Stepanovna and Olga tried to persuade him, put his emotions aside, and accept that his daughter's decision was her life, one he couldn't live for her. Therefore, quarreling with his only daughter was a completely stupid and futile idea. Boris finally agreed, but for a while he spoke to Alyonka and her husband through clenched teeth. After another trip to Olga's dacha, he and her husband entered the apartment, and Olga began looking around restlessly. "Are you forgetting something?" Boris noticed. No. She hesitantly paused in the doorway and began sniffing. "Just don't laugh. I think we smell again." "What?" Boris's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" Olga nodded, then remembered something, laughed, and waved her hand. "Boria, what's wrong? We'll soon be 50. "What pregnancy?" "You never know." He shrugged. "We weren't expecting Alyanka either, and now we've just returned from the sea, had a good rest, visited Mom, and here it is. It smells. This gives rise to some thoughts." "Ugh. No." "I'm telling you." Olga began to fight off her husband because he came up and started hugging her. "We really do smell." "Well, I don't know how you smell them." Boris shrugged. "I don't smell anything. Even if they were standing behind you, you still wouldn't smell it." Olga smiled at them. It was true. At some point, Boris lost his sense of smell, or rather, selectively lost it. He still sensed some smells, but somehow muffled, and some he didn't catch at all. The doctors said that it was possible that this was a complication from an illness. "But I haven't had anything," the man was surprised. "It's quite possible that the disease was asymptomatic, but the consequences still remained." The therapist shook her head. The doctor prescribed treatment and a consultation with a specialist. Boris was treated for a couple of years, and then quit. The medications didn't help, and he had to live with this small defect. He didn't interfere, and in some cases, he even helped. Where others would wrinkle their noses and try to move away, he could calmly approach, do what was needed, and experience no discomfort. Olga, although she laughed at her husband's assumptions about her pregnancy, still went to the doctor and was convinced it wasn't true. However, the smell continued to haunt her, particularly at home. Olga didn't notice it anywhere else. Moreover, she didn't mention it to her husband, but mixed with the scent of men's perfume. A very pleasant one, by the way. Olga liked it so much that she even considered buying it for her husband. But how could she find it if she knew nothing about it except the smell? And did it even exist? Perhaps she simply had some kind of olfactory disorder. If Boris couldn't detect some scents, then why couldn't she detect ones that didn't exist? What if it was another complication of the same obscure and elusive illness? After all, they lived together and could have been sick together. Olga almost convinced herself of this when one day, walking past a man carrying groceries at the mall, she didn't smell the same scent. The woman stopped dead in her tracks. She could approach and ask, but what would they think? The 50-year-old woman rushed at a young stranger, especially since a very beautiful girl, about Alyanka's age, approached him. Olga had already walked about 10 meters away. So what? I'll just leave like this and not recognize you. I'll regret it myself, she thought indignantly to herself, and turned around decisively. Young people. The couple turned around in surprise. Are you for us? Yes, sorry, this question probably seems stupid. If you don't want to, answer it. And what kind of perfume is the young man wearing? I really like it, but I can't find out the name. The girl smiled amiably. You have good taste, I like it too. And I looked at her companion with an offended expression, like a big calf. You only like my perfume. Get in the car, Vitalik. The girl gently nudged him. We'll discuss this later. She turned to Olga and explained, I brought this perfume from Spain for his father, as a present for his future father-in-law, so to speak. But Vitalik didn't let her give it to him. He took it and said that Daddy would be fine. Now I'm even glad about that. The girl told Olga the brand and name and found a photo online and showed her what it looked like on the screen. Then she checked that she'd written everything down correctly, and in a friendly voice, after saying goodbye, she went to catch up with her companion. Alenka, are you planning on coming to see Dad for his birthday? That same evening, Olga called her daughter. Well, then write down what gift you need to bring. Now Olga increasingly caught herself imagining the scent of that perfume at home. This was especially noticeable when she returned from her mother-in-law's dacha. Perhaps the fresh air heightened all her senses, and her brain was mistaking wishful thinking for reality. The woman justified herself. But she didn't mean anything else to Boris. He could have decided that she was obsessing over it. After all, when Olenka gives Dad the perfume, I won't be tormented by the question of where the smell came from anymore, she thought. Probably, Ninok. Thank you very much to you and your Tanyusha. Moito returned home last night, and there was a treat waiting for them. Someone was happy. If it weren't for your daughter, they would have had to sit hungry until morning. The neighbor nodded. You're welcome, Margarita Stepanovna. Can't we help each other out as neighbors? Let me know if you need anything else. And what about your Tatiana? Is yours planning on marrying her boyfriend? If only she could, he's planning to. But they're not proposing. On the other hand, thank God he's not proposing. Otherwise, I don't even know what to make of this son-in-law. He's old enough to be my husband, not my daughter's. Wait a minute to get upset. Just look on TV how many guys like him get married. And they live their lives. Maybe your Tatiana needs one like him. She may be young, but she's not that big either. You can't compare her to our Alyonka. That's like a hurricane and a typhoon combined. Even when she was little, she didn't have a moment's peace. However, like now, I don't know. When he arrives, then we'll find out. So, is he planning to? Of course not. Borya is turning 50 today, an anniversary after all. So, whether you like it or not, you have to respect your own father. Honestly, Nina, I hope she doesn't come alone, but with her husband, a Spaniard. I'll at least get to know him, otherwise I only know everything from the pictures they send. Yes, I send my regards. You see, she's a darling, but she managed to get married. And will yours have time? How old is she? I see she spends most of her time at home, working. And don't talk about it. Margarita Stepanovna, these are the times. Everyone is on their own. It was different before. We all got together to sing songs like construction teams, but now everyone closes themselves off in their own little hole sitting and typing. A friend told me that she has a son the same age as Tanya, and he and his wife will sit at opposite ends of the sofa and send each other messages instead of talking or hugging. I don't know how these days young people have children. They probably have them through the phone too, Nina burst out laughing. Okay, I'll go. Margarita Stepanovna. While my daughter's gone, I need to at least tidy up her room and the house in general. Otherwise she'll come back in the evening, and in the morning it's back to the computer and work. You see, Nina, you're lucky in that. Your daughter lives with you at the dacha almost all the time. Only occasionally does she go away somewhere and immediately return. And my son and daughter-in-law rarely get out to see me, and there's no need to even mention my granddaughter. My only hope is to see her at Boris's anniversary. So you could go see her yourself, see what's going on abroad. What are you talking about? The elderly woman waved her hand dismissively. Who would invite me there? And then, when would I go? My gardening season is in full swing. Who would I leave it to? And when it's winter, my granddaughter and her husband have competitions. They don't have any there. They're traveling all over the world. So we live on different schedules. Okay, so it's kept you busy. I'll go. I still have a lot to do. Me too, Nina smiled and went into her room. Boris's birthday was going to be a difficult one, a true anniversary. And although the Soleils had long jokingly called themselves 50-year-olds, the round number was only now coming. Out of old habit, the man suggested Olga spend the celebration at her mother's dacha, but his wife firmly objected. What are you saying? An anniversary only happens once in a lifetime. People need to be invited. Where? To Margarita Stepanovna's dacha. And what about the pretty dresses, the hairstyles, the competitions? We can't play hide-and-seek in the woods. And then think about your mother. She has to cook everything, and then clean up after the guests. And they still need to be brought and taken away. Let's find a restaurant in the city and invite her there. We'll take your mother there just in time so she can take a break from the garden. And she saw how her son was valued and respected by his colleagues and friends. God willing, Olenka and her husband will come over. Maybe Margarita Stepanovna will finally meet him. They've been living together in sunny Spain for 2 years now, and they still haven't gotten around to seeing their grandmother. Anyway, we're planning a celebration here, and you better think about when to bring Mom here. I suggest this weekend. Go to the dacha and discuss everything with her. Boris shook his head. I work on Saturday. So, we'll go after your shift. We'll talk on Sunday, and then late in the evening I'll come back here to go to work in the morning. By the way, you can stay. Otherwise, Mom will be upset that we came and then left right away. Especially since she probably needs help there. She's been asking me to fix the tiles and renovate the porch for a long time. Olenka, take another jar of salad. Come in the evening, open it, and have some bread. That's your dinner. Margarita Stepanovna, I don't eat in the evenings, especially this late, when I get home and then. Why should I carry so much myself if tomorrow evening Borya goes and takes everything in the car? You'll feel sorry for me too. Okay, the elderly woman nodded. I'm just worried about you, like any parent. You're doing well now, and then suddenly, something might happen. Boris gasped in surprise at his mother's suggestion. Mom, nothing will happen except my anniversary and Olenka's arrival. I promise you, he boomed from the sofa. You promise? His wife looked at him, narrowing her eyes. One would think you were responsible for the planes, the weather, and our daughter's wishes. I'm responsible for Dad's big belt. Just don't tell Alyonka about this, Olga laughed. Otherwise, she's a quick one. Your hand only reaches for your belt, and your daughter Futit is already somewhere in Paraguay at another competition. It's good that she's so independent, Margarita Stepanovna nodded approvingly. And then Nina's daughter hasn't left her room for 3 days. And she brings her all the food right there, and washes the dishes, and cooks all sorts of pickles. And Tatiana just cries. Her boyfriend left. You should have seen him. Older than you, but he acts like he's young and so important. He hasn't even visited Ninka once. It's obvious he's not his status. You said she forbade him herself. Boris recalled an old conversation with his mother, when she was sharing local dacha news. So she forbade him. So what? If you love your daughter, be kind and build a relationship with her mother, and not just wave your hand from behind the fence. Margarita Stepanovna demonstrated a gesture of the neighbor's failed son-in-law, which she herself witnessed. But never mind, I said it's even good. Tatiana will cry and calm down. But then she'll find someone else, more suitable, both in age and in personality. So, my dears, please don't quarrel. We, as mothers, worry about you more than you do. Don't worry, Margarita Stepanovna. Olga smiled softly at her mother-in-law. Borya and I have been through so much already that we probably don't need anyone else except each other. Tatiana Nina is much younger than us. She still has all the surprises in life ahead of her, and besides, how will I live without your dacha? No, you, my dear, will have to put up with me for a long time yet. Olga looked at her husband ironically. He sighed, getting up from the sofa and approaching his wife and mother. You always just want to reproach a man for something. No one is going to leave you. Come on, dear. It's half an hour to the train, otherwise you still have to walk to the station. Aren't you going to take me? Olga looked at him. Boris was embarrassed. Of course I will. Why didn't you tell me before?" "No need," Olga laughed. "I was joking, testing your willingness to please your wife." "Well, how did you test it?" And I was satisfied. "Okay, my dears. Stay here and have some tea, and I'm off." "And with you?" The woman turned to her husband. "I hope we'll see each other tomorrow after all." It sounded like a threat. Boris smiled. "That's so you don't get too relaxed." Olga kissed him on the cheek, picked up the bags her mother-in-law had carefully packed, and headed towards the station. Previously, before Borya bought a car, they used to go to Margarita Stepanovna's dacha by electric train all the time. But many years had passed since then. Olga looked with interest at how the landscape outside the window had changed, how many new dacha villages, buildings, and even some enterprises had appeared along the railway. She was so carried away by the comparison between how it had been and how it had become that she almost missed her own stop, only making her way to it when it was already announced. The woman took her bags and hurriedly began to make her way to the exit. It was a Sunday evening, and there were a lot of people in the carriage. Everyone was returning from a country vacation, so Olga got into the vestibule when the doors were already starting to close. She had to push a bit to get out in time. Phew. The woman exhaled, finding herself on the platform. Well. She was lost in her dreams. Like girl, just a little bit more, and she'd have to take the bus halfway across town to get home. It was already getting dark. The windows in the houses were lit, and the streetlights were on. Olga walked along the sidewalk, thinking how beautiful it was, even in the city, in summer. The light from the streetlights, filtering through the tree leaves, cast whimsical shadows on the pavement. The unsightly city dust obscured the gloom, but these little lights, each one a warm family dinner or the anticipation of a loved one. Approaching her house, the woman automatically raised her head to look out her windows, as she always did when returning from work, and suddenly saw the lights go out. At first, she thought Boris must have left the room and flicked the switch. Boris? But he'd stayed at the dacha with his mother, it seemed. Olga stopped, perplexed. Alyonka was supposed to fly in 2 days, but someone was clearly in the apartment. Maybe her daughter arrived earlier, but why then to their place and not her own? Or was it Borya who overtook her in the car and decided to surprise her? Exactly, it was definitely Borya. She nodded. Olga opened the front door for herself. Now she would find out why he'd decided to leave Margarita Stepanovna earlier, and why, in that case. He hadn't met her at the station and helped her carry her heavy bags. And only then, in the elevator lobby, did the thought occur to her? What if they were robbers? And was she being reckless, rushing to meet them? Maybe she should call the police? But why had they turned on the light? Olga's thoughts kept coming, one wilder than the other. The elevator indicator showed the 6th floor, the very one where their apartment was located. Well, I'll wait and see who comes down, the woman decided. She leaned her bags against the wall and stood a little to the side. After all, the robbers were unlikely to know what the owners of the apartment they'd broken into looked like. A few seconds later, the elevator doors swung open, revealing a couple in front of Olga, a young woman and an older man. A little Olga. The woman didn't even pay attention to this remark, because she was literally dumbfounded. First, by the smell of that very perfume that she kept imagining everywhere, and then by she recognized the girl's companion. He had certainly gained weight, his face had become puffy, and the years were clearly visible at the corners of his eyes, but the same hair and gaze left no doubt. Igor, Olga said, stunned. The man looked a little embarrassed, then looked at her, and incomprehension slowly gave way to recognition. Yes, and we definitely know each other. We were in our youth, Olga. She nodded and turned to his companion. Hello, Tatiana, and your mother assured Margarita Stepanovna that you haven't left your room for 3 days, crying because the man you loved left you. Is that him? Olga nodded toward her old acquaintance. "Sorry, we're in a hurry," Olga said, catching up with her partner and trying to get around the woman blocking their exit. Olga had no doubt who exactly was leaving her and Boris's apartment, and it couldn't be a coincidence. "Stop," she said, her voice truly commanding. "Now you're going to come back and explain what you were doing in our apartment, or I'm calling the police." "Olga, please, don't call the police." The old acquaintance raised his hands placatingly. "We can explain everything, right? Tanya? Well, at least let's try. I hope you won't be a fool." Nina looked at her daughter as she said goodbye before she was supposed to leave for the city. "Mom, what are you talking about? About how fate itself gave you the keys? It would be stupid not to use them. You might get pregnant, and then your old man will be stuck with you." "I'll figure it out myself somehow," Tatiana said angrily, grabbed her bags, and headed to the car. Nina had been eyeing her daughter's suitor with suspicion ever since the first time Tatiana introduced them at the mall. The mother had gone to look at new clothes for the new year and came face to face with the couple in love. The daughter had nowhere to retreat. "Mom, meet Igor," she said, looking at her companion. "Igor, this is my mother, Nina Vasilievna." "Nice to meet you," smiled the man, who looked clearly older than his girlfriend's mother. At home, Nina began to give her daughter a hard time. "Don't you have enough people your own age? You found some old man and are having an affair with him. Mom, don't yell. Did you and Dad have a big age difference too?" "So what? 17 years isn't 30. There's not 30 between us. Well, 25. But I'm not you. I choose for myself, not for you. Why are you going to such lengths? Why do I need people my own age if they don't have a penny to their name? Does he have any? Or just debts, alimony, and ex-wives? Now that's none of your business, Mom, so. You're looking for a wallet? But of course, I don't want to spend my whole life shuttling between the apartment I rented out for the summer to earn a little extra money and the dacha, where prying eyes and gossip about the neighbors lurk behind every fence. Oh, I see. By the way, I'm doing this for you." "Mom, don't tell me that story. Leave it for the neighbors to hear and talk about. Not for me, but for yourself. They're not paying my father's pension anymore, so I have to live on something. And you've never worked a day in your life. And yet, you have enough for a new dress, bread, and caviar." It was hard to hurt Nina with words, but she realized that Tatiana understood perfectly well what was going on, and wasn't acting out of stupidity, but with purpose. Nina even felt an inexplicable sense of pride that her daughter had inherited her enterprising spirit. Tatiana's father, whom Nina married, was a colleague of her father's. They were living in a military compound at the time, and who else could a young woman pay attention to but the unattractive uniformed officers who often dropped by their superiors' homes to pick up documents or just to sit and have a drink? Her parents were against her early marriage, but her future son-in-law managed to persuade her father, who in turn persuaded her mother, promising that they weren't planning on having children for the next couple of years. True, they did within the next 10 years, but that's a minor detail. After the birth of their daughter, the elderly father didn't live long, dying of a heart attack right there in the garrison. Since Nina wasn't working, she and her young child were awarded a substantial military survivor's pension. It was assumed that her husband had died in the line of duty. The young widow and daughter went to live with her parents, who had by then finished their service, and moved to the city for civilian life. Then, her parents passed away, leaving behind a large apartment and a dacha plot, and soon her pension ran out as Tatiana grew up. Nina didn't want to go to work, and she didn't really know how to do anything, so she decided to exchange. She split her parents' apartment into 2 smaller ones and came up with a plan whereby she and her daughter would live at the dacha all summer and rent out their own space by the day. The income each season was enough to do some minor renovations to the apartment after the previous tenants, and tide her over until the following summer. After finishing school, Tatiana took courses, became an accountant, and mostly worked from home, only occasionally visiting the city. If she was late, she usually stayed with friends and returned to the dacha the next day. Sometimes the apartments were empty, as some clients had already left and others were still waiting. Nina would time this and come into town for a haircut and a quick shopping spree. Then, someone would show up who wanted to rent her place for a couple of nights. She would hand them the keys and drive back. When Nina first saw the car the elderly Lovelis had driven to pick up her daughter, she began to wonder if Tatiana hadn't been so wrong after all. However, Igor immediately said he couldn't stand dacha life, so he wouldn't lay claim to Nina's garden or the farm. That's great, the woman decided. And when Tatiana has completely charmed him, we'll sort things out together. There was one catch, though, since both apartments were rented out. There was nowhere for the two of us to stay together. Tatiana's suitor was going through a divorce and rented a room in a communal apartment, hoping to later swap the apartment he shared with his ex-wife. Nina suspected he had also met her daughter as a client when Tatiana handed him the keys to one of the apartments. And then, suddenly, such luck, their neighbor, Margarita Stepanovna, personally handed the girl the keys to her own apartment and told her that her son and daughter-in-law would only return in 2 days. Before handing her the keys back, Tatiana made duplicates. And every time Boris and Olga arrived at the dacha, Tatiana would urgently call her boyfriend, and they would go to their apartment to have fun. Nina would inform her daughter of their owner's return as soon as Boris's car left the neighboring property. But this time, the woman clearly heard Boris's voice and assumed he and his wife had stayed overnight with their mother. Only after some time did she realize that Olga isn't at the dacha. She rushed to call her daughter and almost made it. If the couple had been quicker, they probably would have missed Olga, and no one would have ever known. But it happened the way it did. Nina, how could this be? Margarita Stepanovna shook her head, approaching the fence. Is it really possible to walk into someone else's house so calmly? The elderly woman saw her neighbor digging in the garden and approached the fence to try to find out why she and her daughter had betrayed her trust. Nina straightened her back and looked at her. What's wrong? Your apartment was empty anyway. They weren't bothering anyone there. They didn't take anything. Where else could they go? Your eyes are shameless. You have 2 apartments. You could have given them 1. Well, yeah, what's wrong? Let them arrange their own lives, but these are my apartments, and I earned them with my own head. So don't open your mouth for someone else's piece of land. So, you can't take yours, but you can take mine. Margarita Stepanovna was amazed, shaking her head and heading to her garden beds. She realized that her neighbor didn't feel guilty at all, but on the contrary. He thinks they did everything right and doesn't understand Margarita's reproaches. That evening, Boris rushed off and came home. Olga, threatening to call the police, forced the uninvited guests to stay and wait for him. They took the duplicate keys, talked, and sent Igor and Tatiana on their way. You see, I wasn't imagining the smells at all. The woman smiled with relief when the long evening came to an end. It's Igor that's smelling. That's true, Boris nodded. I didn't tell you, but I've also sometimes been surprised that the guitar seemed to be lying differently. Once I noticed that someone had carelessly dusted it. I thought it was you, but I kept quiet so you wouldn't be offended. Now I need to somehow tell Mom everything and ask her not to communicate with Nina. The man shook his head. I think it's useless. Maybe there won't be any more transmissions through her, but they will still talk. After all, they are neighbors. In that case, Maybe we should put a fence between them so they can't see each other, Olga continued. Boris nodded, agreeing that this would be the best solution. Margarita Stepanovna looked attentively. She watched a fairly young woman tidying up the neighbor's plot after the winter, then called out to her. "Good afternoon. Excuse me, I don't know you. Who are you to Nina?" Nina, the stranger froze in surprise. "And you mean the previous owner, Nina Vasilyevna? So she sold me this dacha. My name is Olga, Margarita Stepanovna. Nice to meet you. My daughter-in-law's name is Olga, too. They are coming with their son. I will definitely introduce you." "And why did Nina suddenly sell the dacha?" "I don't know," the new neighbor shrugged. "She told me that she was tired of pottering around in the soil. She will live in the city from now on." "But not really," the woman shook her head, thinking about where Nina was going to live if she rents out apartments. "What difference does it make?" Margarita Stepanovna, the daughter-in-law, chuckled when she and Boris heard this news together. She left, and thank God, let her live wherever she wants. The main thing is that neither she, nor her daughter, nor anyone else we know ever shows up in our apartment again. That'll be less of a problem for us. Then we don't have to put up a high fence. Your new neighbor, she's like a very good girl. And she's probably about the same age as you. By the way, her name is also Olga. Come on, finish your tea and let's go. I'll introduce you." "Okay." The son nodded, taking a sip. "Just let's agree, Mom, that no matter how nice she is, you won't give her the keys to the apartment." "Okay, what, is that completely impossible?" The mother looked at him questioningly, and seeing his astonished look, she laughed. "Well, of course, dear, I was just joking." And Margarita Stepanovna began to pack a bag of treats for her new neighbor.